A very warm welcome to all of you. Today, we will discuss Part 1 of Chapter 9 International Trade from Class 12th textbook Fundamentals of Human Geography. All of you are familiar with the term trade. Trade means the voluntary exchange of goods and services between two parties. One party sells and the other purchases. In certain places, people barter their goods. Bartering is trading services or goods with another person where there is no money involved. If you have ever swapped one of your toys with a friend in return for one of his or her toys, you have bartered. This type of exchange was relied upon by early civilizations. The history of bartering dates all the way back to 6000 BC. It was adopted by Phoenicians and Babylonians. Goods were exchanged for food, tea, weapons, spices, even objects with high intrinsic value served as money, such as flintstones, obsidian, which is an extrusive igneous rock, cowries' shells, tiger's paws, whale's teeth, dog's teeth, skins, furs, cattle, rice, pepper, corns, salt, small tools, and copper, gold, and silver. Today, we practice barter when we exchange our old clothes with utensils. Your mothers must have sold out those old clothes of yours and exchange the utensils with the person who is coming up to take your old clothes. An example of barter system from India is Jaunbil Mela, which is important in the lives of the tribal communities. Every January, after the harvest season, Jaunbil Mela takes place in Jagigrod, 35 kilometers away from Guwahati, and it is possibly the only fair in India where barter system is still alive. A big market is organized during this fair and people from various tribes and communities exchange their products. There were difficulties in the barter system as the people who were trading does not have any proof or certification that they are legitimate, and there is no consumer protection or warranties involved. These difficulties of barter system were overcome by the introduction of money. We have two levels of trade: national and international. National trade is conducted within a country among different states, like Gujarat is supplying cotton textiles to Andhra Pradesh, whereas international trade is the exchange of goods and services among countries across national boundaries. Countries need to trade to obtain commodities they can't produce themselves, or they can procure certain goods at a lower price from elsewhere. Now, let's look at the history of international trade. Trade was restricted to a small distance due to theft in early days. People used to satisfy their immediate needs. An example of ancient trade route is the Silk Route, also known as the Silk Road, linking China to Rome, connecting 6,000 kilometers route. This route carried goods and ideas between the two great civilizations of Rome and China. Silk went westwards and Roman wool, gold, silver went east. This route, originating at Xi'an in China, bypassed the Taklamakan Desert, crossed Afghanistan and Greater Syria. After the disintegration of Roman Empire, European commerce grew during 12th and 13th century. It led to European prosperity. With the development of ocean-going vessels, trade between Europe and Asia grew. In 1492, a Spanish expedition commanded by Christopher Columbus discovered Americas. Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama is credited with establishing sea route from Europe to India in 1497. Thus, 15th century onwards, the European colonization began. Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, English and French explored new trade routes and started trading in exotic commodities. A new form of trade emerged in mid-17th century. Trading ships would set sail from Europe with a cargo of manufactured goods to the west coast of Africa. There, these goods would be traded over weeks and months for captured people or slaves, provided by African traders. Then it was known as slave trade. The Portuguese, Dutch, Spaniards, and British forcefully transported them to the newly discovered Americas or the Caribbean for their labor in the plantations. Slave trade was a lucrative business for more than 200 years, till the end of the 18th century, when people began to campaign against slavery. It was abolished in Denmark in 1792, Great Britain in 1807, United States in 1808, and the Netherlands in 1814. The Industrial Revolution in the 18th century was the process of change from an agrarian and handicraft economy to one dominated by industry and machine manufacturing. The demand for raw materials like grains, cotton, wool, meat, iron ore also expanded. Manufactured goods became expensive or costly. The industrialized nations imported agricultural and industrial raw materials from their colonies and exported the value-added finished products back to these now industrialized countries. In the latter half of the 19th century, industrial nations became each other's main trading partners, leaving underdeveloped countries and the colonies. During World War I and II period, countries imposed trade taxes and erection of barriers to trade. After World War II, the major countries of the world set up GATT. You probably heard about this. It was General Agreement for Tariffs and Trade, which became the world's most important multilateral trade agreement. In 1995, the GATT became the World Trade Organization, which has now more than 140 member countries. So we have done the history of international trade. Now let us discuss about what is international trade actually. If you walk into a supermarket and find South American bananas, Brazilian coffee, and a pack of Swiss chocolates, you are experiencing the effects of international trade. What is the meaning of international trade? International trade is referred to as the exchange or trade of goods and services between different nations. This kind of trade contributes and increases the world economy. The most commonly traded commodities are television sets, clothes, machinery, capital goods, food, and agricultural raw material. International trade has increased exceptionally. That includes services such as foreign transportation, travel and tourism, banking, warehousing, communication, advertising, and distribution. Other equally important developments are the increase in foreign investments and production of foreign goods and services in an international country. This foreign investments and production will help companies to come closer to their international customers and therefore serve them with goods and services at a very low rate. Reasons for international trade, or why does international trade exist? Production. It is not possible for a single country to produce equally at a cheap cost. That is why international trade is taken into account. Factors of production. Factors of production like labor, capital, raw material. They are important for producing goods and services which are available at different rates in different countries. Cost of production. Each country finds it advantageous to produce only those goods and services that it can produce efficiently. Rest of the activities are given to other countries at a lower cost. Resource distribution. Many of the times, companies face problems in the availability of natural resources. There is an unequal distribution of the resources in the country. For example, different countries are specialized in different sectors. Like in India, Maharashtra is involved in textile industry, West Bengal in jute products, Haryana and Punjab in food products, whereas Kerala specializes in spices. Same is categorized for other countries. International trade also exists because some countries have specialization in production. They have division of labor, comparative advantage over others, complementarily and transferability of goods and services, mutual benefit to the trading partners. Trade is related to the foreign policy, and well-developed transport and communication are developed over there. Importance of international trade. International trade between various nations is an essential factor that is responsible for the increase in the standard of living, creating employment, and empowering consumers to enjoy different kinds of goods. Few other important factors that are influenced by the international trade are utilization of raw materials. Some countries are naturally blessed with an abundance of raw materials. For example, Qatar for oil, Iceland for metals and fish. Without international trade, these countries would never benefit from their natural resources or raw materials. There is greater choice for consumers. More international trade results in more choices of products. Specialization and economies of scale, that is greater efficiency. This means that it doesn't matter what a country is specialized in. The essential thing is to pursue a specialization that allow companies to make a profit that outweighs most of the other factors. Global growth and economic development. International trade influences economic growth of a country. This increase also leads to the reduction of poverty levels. Now we will come on to the next topic, basis of international trade. The factors on which international trade depends are: number 1, difference in national resources. The resources are unevenly distributed in the world. These differences mainly refer to geology, mineral resources and climate. If we look at the geological structure, these are the relief features, the type of land such as fertile or infertile, mountainous or lowlands that support agriculture, tourism and other activities. The mineral resources are also very important. The regions rich in minerals will support industrial development that leads to trade. Whereas the climate, it influences the type of flora and fauna that is found in a region, such as wool production in cold regions. Cocoa, rubber, bananas can grow in tropical regions. The second important factor is population. The size, distribution and diversity of population between countries affect the trade in respect of type and volume of goods. Large volume of internal trade than external trade takes place in densely populated areas due to consumption in local markets. Cultural factors. Distinctive forms of art and craft develop in certain cultures and give rise to trade. For example, the porcelain and brocades of China, carpets of Iran, batik cloth of Indonesia, and there are many others to name. Size of population. The size, distribution and diversity of population between countries affect the trade in respect of type and volume of goods. Large volume of internal trade than external trade takes place in densely populated areas due to consumption in local markets. Stage of economic development. Industrialized nations export machinery, finished products, and import food grains and raw materials. The situation is opposite in agriculturally important countries. Extent of foreign investment. Developing countries lack capital, so foreign investment can boost trade in developing countries by developing plantation agriculture. Transport. Lack of transport in older times restricted trade only to local areas. The expansion of road and rail, ocean and air transport, better means of refrigeration and preservation. Trade has experienced spatial expansion. Important aspects of international trade. There are three very important aspects of international trade. Number one is the volume of trade. It is measured simply as the total value of goods and services traded. However, actual tonnage of traded goods makes up the volume, but services traded cannot be measured in tonnage. Second, we have composition of trade. Earlier, primary goods were more in total traded goods. Then there was dominance of manufactured goods. And now there is dominance of service sector, which includes transportation and other commercial services. The third important aspect is the direction of trade. Earlier, valuable goods and artifacts were exported to European countries by the developing countries. Later, in the 19th century, manufactured goods from European countries were exchanged with foodstuffs and with raw materials from their colonies. Europe and US emerged as major trade partners in the world and were leaders in the trade of manufactured goods. Japan at that time was also an important trading country. During the second half of the 20th century, Europe lost its colonies while India, China, Brazil and other developing countries started competing with developed countries. The nature of goods traded also changed. This is the end of part 1. Let's have a quick revision of the topics which we have covered in this part. What is the meaning of trade? The two levels of trade. What is barter system? What is the need of international trade? History of international trade. Why does international trade exist? Basis of international trade. Important aspects of international trade. I hope you have understood these topics well. Do study your textbook for a better understanding. Thank you.